Welcome to the ISO Show, dispelling myths and sharing tips for success to improve your business with ISO standards, with your host, Mel Blackmore.
Hi and welcome to the ISO Show. The episode today is going to be covering the changes to ISO 22301, the Business Continuity Standard. So we have covered in a previous episode just a brief introduction to the standard and the benefits, but this is going to be an episode where I'm going to hand over to Rachel Churchman, our business continuity expert, on the key changes to the standard, because ISO 22301 was published in 2012, but every few years or so, because of changes to business environments and changes in market conditions, etc., and risks that businesses face, then the standard gets updated because obviously businesses evolve and so the standards need to evolve as well. So the latest version is the 2019 version. So it was published late in 2019 in November, and that's what Rachel's going to be going through. Now, before I hand over to Rachel, I'd just like to highlight something that ISO show listeners will be interested in, which are actually free standards. Now, I never thought I'd mention this because standards haven't been free before at all. Normally, they retail at anything from £120 to up to £300 for a copy of the standard. If we look at the Business Continuity Standard, for example, ISO 22301 2019, the cost of that, if you went to purchase that from a standards body such as BSI, is £214. Now, as a result of the outbreak of coronavirus, COVID-19, BSI, the British Standards Institution, has worked with international standards organisations across the world to actually make these standards accessible for free. Okay, so it's not just ISO 22301 that's available for free. So that's in effect, over £200 worth of standard available for free. There are actually 11 standards within the Resilience series. So this is covering continuity and resilience standards. Now, I'm not going to name them all right now, but I will list them in our ISO show notes. But just to give you a hint of what's included within those, obviously other than 22301 is 22313, which is the management system guidance, which I've mentioned in a previous podcast. Also guidelines for supply chain continuity, organisational resilience. So there are basically 5 standards within continuity and resilience, but there are also 2 standards in relation to risk management, one of which is ISO 31000. So even if you're not interested in achieving certification to this particular standard, I definitely recommend that you go to the link and you download that for free right now, and also the guidance to that standard. And then we have some other standards available as well, like on community resilience and also emergency management. And emergency management is ISO 22320. So that's guidelines on incident management. Anyway, getting back to ISO 22301, because that is the main standard. It's the most popular standard globally in relation to business continuity management. I'm now going to hand over to Rachel Churchman for her to basically just talk through the key changes to the new standard. Thanks very much for joining us today, Rachel.
Thanks, Mel. Yes, so as Mel mentioned, I'm just going to be running through some of the key changes within the new ISO 22301-29 standard. So as Mel mentioned, it was late October, early November 2019 that the standard was updated. The previous version was in 2012, and it was actually one of the very first standards to be published with the new high-level structure format with the clauses 4 to 10. And there were some minor amends in 2014, however, that didn't materially affect the standard. So the 2019 key changes are as follows. Probably the biggest change is the whole standard is now far more streamlined, and a lot of repetition that had been in the previous standard has been removed. It's also looking to align far more closely with other standards. As it was the first one to adopt the new high-level structure, as new standards have been published since then, they have refined the requirements over time, and it was really time for the 22301 standard to catch up. There were previously some minor clause deviations. So for anyone who either has 22301 and other standards, or if you're looking to implement 22301 and you have an existing ISO management system in place, alignment and integration is now far improved. So the new standard now takes a broader approach to business continuity, and it's taking it from strategy-based through to solution-based. So the 2019 standard requires organisations now to not only develop those high-level strategies, which was always in the standard, but also to define the solutions that will handle specific risks and impacts relevant to your business continuity and resilience. So this is a significant change for top management, because the identification of required resources is now related to solutions and not strategies. And defining resources in terms of strategies is perhaps not as precise as when you start defining solutions, because solutions will generally affect the bottom line or any future budget planning for your business continuity management system. Managing changes within the BCMS is now a mandatory clause, whereas previously in the old standard this was just implied throughout the standard. But the new requirement now requires businesses to make any changes, any planned or actual changes, in a planned manner. So it's achieved by considering, the purpose of the change and the consequences to the management system and business continuity, how the integrity of the business continuity management system is impacted by the change. So we need to look at how the change ripples through things like response plans or continuity plans. Changes that might affect resources, you need to have the resources available to affect the change. And definition of change of responsibilities and authorities, so they need to be defined as well. So as I mentioned earlier, the standard is more streamlined, and there are a number of areas now where the standard is actually significantly less detailed and prescriptive than the old standard. So for instance, Clause 4 for context and scope. The clauses here are now in alignment with other ISO standards. So ISO 22301-2012 was actually very prescriptive in these areas, far more than any of the other standards. And it's now been stripped back to align with the other standards. And some of the requirements that were previously found in scope and context have now been moved and highlighted further on in the standard. The planning clause, so clause 6.1.2, now makes it very clear that risks and opportunities that need to be addressed, they need to relate to the effectiveness of the management system as opposed to the risk of disruption. And those areas are now picked up in the operational clause 8.2.3. So this again aligns with the other standards now on the high level structure, and it also reduces that repetition. Requirements for conducting the business impact analysis are now clearer, and the relationship between unacceptable impact and the maximum tolerable period of disruption and prioritised timeframes for getting things back up and running is defined quite well in this clause, as well as using the business impact analysis to identify those prioritised activities, those significant issues and services that need to be maintained. So the maximum tolerable period of disruption and recovery time objectives, they were terms that have now been sort of brought back into the standard within relevant notes. So there are guidance notes now throughout the standard. One interesting element is there is no longer a specific requirement in the 2019 version to document the business impact analysis process. However, there is a new requirement in the standard that looks at evaluation of business continuity documentation and capabilities specifically required to ensure suitability, adequacy and effectiveness of business impact analysis and risk assessments. So naturally, you would expect there to be some defined BIAs and risk assessments in place in order to be able to address the evaluation requirement. So the evaluation of business continuity documents, this was previously only sort of an implied requirement, but it now is a specific clause in the standard. So the concept of minimum activity levels has shifted. It's moved slightly from the need to identify minimum levels of products and services to minimum acceptable levels of activity. So this now reflects the fact that it's a minimum acceptable capacity for resumed activities. You may not necessarily get back to the same level as before. So one of the criticisms perhaps in the previous standard was the lack of detail and requirements relating to the supply chain for business continuity. And this has been addressed in the new standard, as there's now a requirement to ensure that outsourced processes and supply chain are controlled. So this is a clear indication that the supply chain does form a critical link to an organisation's own business continuity management system, and that now needs to be reviewed and controlled. So from an exercise and test perspective, there is now a direct reference to validating continuity strategies and solutions, whereas previously we were just looking at simply exercising and testing business continuity arrangements. So it's now specifically looking for us to ensure our strategies and solutions are going to be effective for the business. So if your organisation is currently certified to ISO 22301-2012, the information that we have obtained from the BSI website, which is currently the most up-to-date information, is that it's anticipated you'll have 3 years to transition across to the new 2019 version. And after the 30th of October 2022, certificates for the 2012 standard will no longer be valid. So again, this is off the BSI website. BSI are noting that they will continue to deliver audits against the 2012 standard until the 30th of April next year, so that's 2021. So this gives us time to get our systems updated and aligned with the new 2019 requirements. From a personal perspective, I think the changes in the 2019 standard are very good. They have provided some focus in some key areas that perhaps were a bit woolly, if you like, in the 2012 standard. It's great that they have lost the repetition. And I think anyone who was applying the 2012 standards well in the organisation is not going to struggle to meet the new requirements for the 2019 standard.
Thanks, Rach, for providing that overview of the changes. That's great. So hopefully that's going to help out anybody that's already got the standard in place and they're already certified to the 2012 version and they're looking at embarking on making that migration over to the new standard. I'm sure that all those comments and the detailed overview of the standard will be helpful. Now, earlier I mentioned that there are 11 resilient standards available for free to download from BSI. We will provide those links in our ISO show notes, but I must say that these standards are only available at the current time, and the current time of recording this podcast is June 2020. So definitely make the most of that free resource whilst it's still there, because remember, these are only being provided for free for those organisations that need to actively respond to the COVID-19 situation. So that is all businesses pretty much, but obviously it's not going to be there forever. And just to remind you of the value, the monetary value of these documents, there's over £1,000 worth easily of standards available for free for you to download right now, and to put them into practice and to learn from them to help to improve your business deal with these difficult times. So make the most of it, as I say, whilst they're still there available for free, because in the 14 years that we've been running Blackmores, we've never come across free standards before. So yeah, make the most of the opportunity whilst you can. In addition to providing a link to these free standards, We're also providing Rachel's overview on the changes to ISO 22301 2019. So that's going to be available for free via our website. So just get in contact with us via www.blackmoresuk.com. And finally, if you'd like assistance with the migration to the new standard, to the 2019 version, or if you decide that you'd like to implement ISO 22301 from scratch because you haven't got a robust business continuity system in place, then we'd love to hear from you. Just drop us a line. All the contact details are available on our website, and we'd be more than happy to help. So thanks very much for listening, and I look forward to catching up with you on the next ISO show.
Looking to use ISO standards to drive better business practice? Contact us at blackmoresuk.com to access further information and book your free 15-minute call.